to Lehigh from 67 to 71, which was my undergraduate, and stayed for 2 more years to get my MBA. At the time, Lehigh was all male, and as such, the fraternity system was huge. It was the only social program in the college. It housed 50% of the upper class males at Lehigh, 40-some chapters. And it was characteristic of the schools and Greek systems at the time. During the Vietnam War era, there was a lot of falling off of membership, and a couple of chapters started to fail. At the time, I was not in a fraternity. The university had tried to create a couple, what I would call local fraternities, small houses, 44 men, private rooms, to sort of combat the evil Greek genius on the hill that they had created. And we were in one of those houses. As a couple of these traditional fraternities failed, the university had this huge investment and they had to fill it. So they started to look at a couple of these locals to move up, take over that asset. And as I was graduating at 71, when I was president of the house, one of those opportunities looked like it was about to come open, but it didn't before I graduated. And then I came back in graduate school. There was a question whether I was going to Vietnam at the time. But when I got back at graduate school, we were able to negotiate for the next available house. We moved up to what was then Tau Delta Phi in the 71, 72 year. And as we were talking with their national and learning a little bit about it, I concluded that this was not the place we wanted to be, at least from a national standpoint. So we started looking for other nationals. And the first time in Lehigh's history that a group changed national affiliation, we were never actually in Tau Delta Phi, that's where we were supposed to be going, changed affiliations and started a brand new chapter on campus, we decided on Zeta Psi. By the time we got all that done, met all the university requirements, did all the rushing, and initiated, it was May of 73. I graduated in June of 73. So I was a Zeta as an undergraduate, not even as an undergraduate, as a graduate student, for about 2 weeks. Since we were the whole group, once we graduated, we had to form our own alumni association. So I became president of the elders, formed the elder group, and got more involved with international at that point because we had virtually no contact with them before until we were chartered. And stayed in that capacity for 20, 30 years. Through that, I got involved in international, ultimately came onto the board, eventually went up the chairs and became Phi Alpha a few years ago. I'm now chairman of legal and compliance committee and serve as the general counsel for the fraternity. My undergraduate degree was in social psychology, so we actually studied this concept, and it's called cognitive dissonance. You have a group that wants something very positively. They want to join this organization. If you make them do difficult things or even more unpleasant things, they have a problem because the positive is to get into the group, but they've got to accept this negative of being hazed, if you will, for lack of a better description. So they got to figure out a way for those two things to fit together because one's positive, one's negative. The psychological theory is that because of that, they enhance their affiliation strength. because for them to agree to do these dumb things, it's got to be an incredibly positive condition to override it. And the theory has always been that that's a means of enhancing the commitment to the group. On a purely psychological level, and there's some problems probably with that that some psychologists today would take on it. Some of it I just think is nasty people, to be perfectly honest, as far as my opinion goes. And it just becomes a bit of a power thing for some guys. And in many kinds of organizations and situations, like bullying today as it's identified, one person or two people act in an inappropriate way, but the rest of the group doesn't stop them. They don't stand up and say, hey, that's not a good idea. And then it becomes institutionalized. It's a very difficult kind of thing to rid the system of, because every 3 years you have a completely new group of people that have never had any experience with the men that they're talking to. So even if you eradicate it for a period of time, it frequently comes back through these personal psychological characteristics. And that's one of the things that we've been spending a lot of time trying to do, is deal with the honor campaign, which is what we call it, an anti-hazing campaign, which is focused on two simple realities. A, hazing does nothing positive, ultimately. There's absolutely no evidence to show that guys that were hazed are better brothers or better alumni in the long term than ones that weren't hazed. And secondly, you want to get the best commitment you can from both the undergraduate as well as the alumni. And to do that is to just have positive occurrences, to have them instructed about the fraternity history and the activities of that chapter, to be engaged with the chapter, officer positions in the university, sports, all the kinds of things that are positive reinforcements of their association, and see where that is rewarded, which we do through various kinds of prizes and awards, scholarships, trips to convention, that are all positively reinforcing the behavior. It's just a simple approach to say, do positive things, you get positively reinforced for them, and you have a positive outcome, instead of the psychological manipulation that hazing and power control is all about. It's difficult to gauge the results of the honor campaign compared to the negative results that we're trying to eliminate. Certainly, when we see anything that resembles hazing, we take disciplinary action with that group. Hopefully it's remedial. We explain it to them, we have a meeting over it, we talk with their elders, and hopefully they understand, oh, this really isn't that good an idea, we really weren't thinking, we're going to change our approach, and they move positively away from hazing and towards more productive activities. And then we never have to see them again from a disciplinary standpoint. If they don't get it, and they have an occurrence of hazing that's serious, discipline will suspend them in some cases or take their charter. It is simply not an acceptable set of behavior that Zeta Psi is willing to handle. You know, I think the commitment to the fraternity is personal in each case. I don't think it can be standardized. Some people, and this always amazed me, particularly when I was Phi Alpha, guys that were officers as undergraduates, maybe officers as alumni, you never see them again. They just completely disappear and have no further contact with the fraternity. That always amazed me, how you could be committed at a junior in high school or college level and then disappear at 22. And then there's other guys that were sort of in the background, very quiet, maybe a lower level officer, if anything, and they blossom through that experience. They learn to give back to that experience, and they become long-term committed Zates, many on the board, many making significant contributions, and many of them literally have more social contacts, not only close friends, but business contacts, professional contacts with other Zates for their lifetime than they do non-Zates throughout their experience. It affects each person differently, and they manifest it differently. I've seen some brothers, particularly elder brothers, that very quietly will make significant contributions to make sure that something positive happens at their chapter, or that a program gets funded at the international level, where you wouldn't just see that kind of behavior in anything else. It draws on the best kind of interest that you have, and it's reinforced by those other brothers that, like you, have the same attitude, and that are constantly reinforcing each other. And I think that's why many of the brothers that you'll talk to, particularly the alumni, particularly ones that are like at convention that are engaged, will tell you how much of their social sphere, not associated with their elder organization, not associated with the fraternity specifically, but how many of their doctors and lawyers and financial planners and insurance agents are fellow Zates. They know there's a commitment there the first time they meet that guy, even if they've never met him before, and it provides a commonality and a comfort level that is very difficult to get, particularly in our society today, which is fairly cynical. We have a president's conference every year. We bring in the president of every chapter at Lafayette College in Pennsylvania, and have a 2 or 3 day session of training, behavior activity, how to deal with administrations, how to deal with recalcitrant brothers, etc. And we've developed recently a scenario simulation of what kind of really bad things could happen. And we use that as a training tool to say, if this kind of behavior happens, what would you do here? And walk these guys through it. And one of them, obviously, is a potential lawsuit for whatever bad thing we arranged in the scenario. And we walk through it. Usually, I'm there and I play a nasty cop role, nasty lawyer role, I should say, I guess. And after one of them, a couple years ago, one of the guys came up to me afterwards that I had grilled badly as the district attorney, informing him he was going to spend the rest of his life in a 2x4 cell with a guy named Butch. He came up afterward and says, I never thought of half the stuff we get told in meetings and in sessions about how serious things were. But when I was talking with you, I was scared to death. And I said, good, because I don't want you ever to be in the situation where somebody like me is going to have to talk to you that way. And he says, it was the greatest experience I've had.